Well, Immortals has been making some changes recently, and there's been a lot of questions about that. So I am joined right now by Mike. Mike, actually, what is your title at Immortals?
Hmm. Yeah, so my title right now is interim general manager for the LCS team.
Okay. Well, of course, this coverage is brought to you by Alienware. So, for those of you that don't know Mike, I've actually known Mike since what, 2014, 2015?
Yeah, probably beginning 2016, tail end of 2015. Yeah.
Yeah. And you at the time were managing CLG.
I was actually the player development coach for CLG. That was back when like Matcom was still the manager. But
Oh, right. I
yeah,
in
yeah.
my mind, I have you as manager because Matcom was not there. My biggest memories are China because you were there for MSI
MS.
when
Yep.
CLG did very well, and and I remember interacting with you a ton there. But obviously outside of that as well. And then you joined Immortals a while
hmm
after that, right?
Yeah. So basically, I was with CLG from 2016 to the end of 2017. Went from the league team to the CS:GO team, so worked with both of them across those 2 years. Once the CLG kind of disbanded the CS:GO team, I ended up getting in touch with Noah, getting the job at Immortals to work with the Valiant as the team manager for the Overwatch team, and then from there I have been the general manager actually for the past 2 years until making this switch back to League of Legends. So
Great. So I think the first question that a lot of people will have, and the reason I asked for this interview is, people seem to have no idea what is going on with Immortals in League of Legends. They're like, "What is this? What's happening?" Obviously,
yeah.
people knew Zab and some knew Keaton, but I didn't even realize that you had switched over to work on the league side until we ended up in a Discord call whenever scheduling interviews during
Yeah.
LCS this past weekend. So
Yeah.
I think just getting insight into what's going on behind the scenes and sort of how we got to the place that we're in right now would be helpful.
Yeah. So, we built this roster getting back into the LCS for, the 2020 season, obviously. And, we had a lot of expectations. Obviously, the brand Immortals carries a lot of weight with the history of the LCS. And, making a comeback, we wanted to make a good comeback. We had a really high expectations for this season. And, even towards spring, we had a bit of a stretch where we're actually up in the top three, I believe, for a couple of weeks. But as kind of spring went on, we ended up declining in performance and we finished outside of playoffs, which was definitely not in line with the expectations. Going into summer, switched up the roster a little bit. First couple of weeks, just again, same story, right? Not meeting expectations. So ultimately, we felt that we had to make a change sooner rather than later. So that kind of brings us into present day.
Okay. And so what is actually about like at Immortals on the staff and management side? What does that look like? Because I think a lot of people have insight into, let's say, TSM, right? They know that it's like Reggie and Parth and Lena over there. You've
Right.
got Cloud9 with Jack and Reaper and all those folks. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe you can help shed light into like who's actually over at Immortals, because obviously you are, but I think once we saw the two names that people were familiar with depart,
Mm-hmm.
people have a lot of questions about like what actually is going on over there and who's at the helm.
Yeah, so really looking at the LCS side specifically, right? I'm taking over as the interim GM, so I handle basically final say and decision across the board. Insofar as like coaching and direct player staff, we just have our assistant coaches with us right now. So that's Go to One, who's Adrian, and then Malakliff's Paul, both of them working with me. So we pretty much run it together. We all talk about what needs to get done on a day-to-day basis for now, and obviously looking towards planning for the future and stuff. So it's a bit of a smaller staff to run the team, but right now we're making it work.
And you say interim GM, so it sounds like I know there's a lot of people on Reddit who I seem to know a lot about running a team, and so I'm curious: is there a job posting somewhere that these people could apply for?
Apparently, it's going to be my inbox on Twitter, right? Sliding into the DMs, I've gotten a few already. But,
Okay.
no, like for us, with how we approach this year and what we want to go into next year, the reason we actually didn't announce, like, hey, Keaton and Zab are departing, and then we're bringing in somebody that you may know in the community as another figure. Um, we want to make sure we're taking our time and doing our due diligence, and that was kind of part of why this move is so important to do now rather than like wait till the end of the season, like a lot of people were probably expecting, right? Um, we'd rather take as much time as possible to really prepare and find the right culture fit for Immortals who can lead the team going forward. So that's what we're really spending the time on, is getting that process nailed down, finding those candidates, so that we have something and when we can communicate with the audience more substantively, like that's when we're definitely going to be able to do so.
And what are you guys looking at when you look at the League of Legends side right now in terms
Mm-hmm.
of 2020 plans, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
or is this kind of a let's see how well we can do and try out different players while we find the right staff to run the team, and then 2021 is when we make a big push? Or is this a situation where you're hoping to like solve things relatively quickly? Because it sounds like you're taking a long term view on this, but unfortunately, Summer Split is active and games are being played weekly,
Right.
right? So it's kind of it's maybe a little difficult to reconcile some of that.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a balance you have to play with the two, right? So obviously in the day to day, I think you've kind of seen a little bit of a shift in the philosophy that we've had, right? We did put out our academy roster this past weekend, who got their first win, which really good to see those guys step up and perform. I'm sure people were really happy to see Xfinity back on stage, to see Insanity perform for the first time. Um, so the way we kind of approached it was, with the roster that came into the season, uh, you know, in the jungle specifically, I know it was a big point of contention, so I'll address that and then leave that into the longer term. Was, Potluck and Xmithy were always competing for a spot, and in this offseason assessment, Potluck earned the spot. Nothing against Jake there, right? Potluck was performing really well, and we wanted to give the kid the shot. I'm a firm believer, and at IGC we're really pushing for, developing that younger talent. So we're giving that the showcase. We want to make sure that we can facilitate that. And then same with Insanity, right? We swapped out the rosters to facilitate that growth. You know, and as we're kind of going through the rest of the split, we're definitely evaluating, what combination of players is going to perform the best, because I think it's a bit disingenuous to just say like, yep, we're done, we're punching it, you're just going to go for 2021, right? You don't get to make that excuse, and I think that's not great for the fans and community either. But I think it's nice to be able to showcase those players, especially when they start getting wins, of course. So as we're kind of going through the rest of the season, it's going to be trying those out, seeing what pieces we do have going into the next year. But also, I don't think this team is outside of playoffs, especially for the summer split. So
Do you just on the jungle side? What led to the decision to have Potluck in? Because I know you said it was a situation where Potluck proved himself, but there were also rumors surrounding Xmithy potentially, and I'll just say it, showing up intoxicated to scrims. So I don't know if there were behavior issues as well, or dedication or motivation issues that you were saying, or what was going on there.
yeah, I mean, honestly, I think, and like I said, I jumped into this position pretty recently, as you know. But just from, I think Xmithy, you heard it best from when he talked to you after LCS this past weekend, right? Where did these rumors really come from? As we saw it, it basically became, it was just Potluck earned that spot, and over the, he put in the grind, and giving the kid the shot was what it was, what it came down to, honestly. Like, McSmithy's been a great teammate and a great leader for us, so it's kind of good to have those players and those dynamics be able to challenge each other. So again, don't know where that rumor came from. That's what I would leave it at.
Yeah. What are you guys looking at in terms of GM for the org? Because I think there's a lot of confusion among different, not confusion, but there's a lot of different philosophies in terms of what you can do or who you grab as a GM, right? Like,
Right.
Golden Guardians picked up Danon from C9, where he'd actually
Yep.
been doing a bunch of stuff over there.
Mhm.
Pop Smithy was on Hotline League this past week, their GM. And then there's a lot of teams that just kind of like, it doesn't really feel like they have a GM. So
Right.
I guess, what do you guys see as the what you need out of a prospective GM?
Mhm. Yeah. So, I mean, put simply, I think with the way I approach the general manager position is it really should just be the somebody who owns the brand. Um, I want to be able to say to somebody, hey, give me your plan, give me your vision. How can I best enable you to be successful in that? And then I want you to run with it. So it's less of like, hey, you're going to just handle logistics and coordinate with Riot. Hey, you're just going to do these few things and maybe some content pieces here and there. Um, no, you're actually going to own the brand, the competitive aspect of it, and everything that falls within what Immortals League of Legends will be. So that means like competitive decisions should really be made by the general manager. It shouldn't have to keep running through a bunch of different outlets. It should be, I should be able to go to one person and say, you own this project. What do you want to do? What are your goals? How are you tracking against those goals? And where are we going to be successful? So put simply, I want somebody to head that division and enable them to be successful.
Gotcha. All right. Other than that, what should Immortals fans expect from the organization this year? I'll be candid and I'll say it does feel as though fans who were kind of expecting a triumphant return from Immortals, not just on the roster side, but even kind of in areas of branding or whatever. Like it doesn't really feel like Immortals has lived up to the people's memories of it,
Yeah.
especially in a year where we've seen like pretty big like content and branding pushes from FlyQuest, and EG came in with like a whole like they went out and bought a
Right.
bunch of players and have done a bunch of stuff like so. I don't know what is your reflection on Immortals at this point up in the year, and what should fans expect going forward?
Yeah, no, and I think just being candid as well, right? Like the expectations from when we came back into where we are now just are two different worlds, and it's unacceptable to us. I think with the regards to like transparency and communication, we haven't done a great job with it, and we should also be cognizant going forward that we want to be more open, and there should be some more conversations we have with the community and our fan base. Not to the same extent I think that it was transparent, but when we have something substantive and actionable, we want to be open with the community about it. So we don't want to just say things for the sake of saying things, right? I think that's actually kind of the opposite of what we want to do with this. We want to make sure that if we have something, we're taking our time, we're presenting it to the community in like the finished light. We don't want to just throw out like half-assed solutions to things or things to make people feel good, like as we're saying them, like without substance behind it, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of address that. Is we haven't lived up to those expectations, and really like that's on us, and we have to push forward and make sure when we have substance, we communicate that effectively to the team
Yeah.
or to the community.
Well, I mean, I feel like we've touched on most of the topics around it. I'm trying to think if there's any others, but I think other than that, I guess one question is how solidified are we that the roster that we saw play this past weekend, something people refer to as the Academy roster, which I would
Yeah.
maybe not refer to it as that, but how certain are we that that'll be the roster that we see going forward throughout the rest of the split?
I mean, so just being frank, that roster that we saw this past weekend is going to be playing this weekend as well. After that, I've let everybody across the board know that it's performance-based evaluation, right? Whoever we think is playing the best and will have the best fit, that we can, create a good synergy with, like those will be the people that are going to be playing on stage, right? When I look at this roster, I know a lot of people will see it and it kind of irks people the wrong way, where it's like, oh, it's a 10-man roster. They don't know what they're doing with what, the pieces are. I think to an extent, we trialed everything out across the offseason. We saw some of these pieces work together, but maybe not in the most effective way. So as we kind of test out them in isolation, like we did with potluck, like we did with or doing with insanity right now, maybe there's a situation where we find a better fit with the current players we have, and we want to be able to showcase that. And I want the players to be able to feel like they're competing for something and they can actually get on that stage. They're not relegated to academy, or they're only going to play on the main stage.
Sure.
So
Okay. So it sounds like at least this weekend we'll see the same, but no promises or guarantees on
Right.
who we'll see play in the future.
Right.
Is there anything that you want to say to any of the Immortals fans here at the end of the interview?
So I guess one of the bigger things too, with regards to Aka, obviously he's probably taken the most criticism out of the entire Immortals roster going into this split. I think there's a line that we have to draw as a community where there's an acceptable level of criticism that we can give, for a professional player. Obviously, like he's a public figure, he should be in that spotlight and be able to be criticized. I think we do have to be very cognizant about like when we start attacking the person behind it, as like a human being. Obviously, I know there's been a couple shifts and people have brought it up, but I know Brox have brought it up in a tweet. Like it does border on bullying, and I think we should really be cognizant of like criticism is definitely acceptable given the nature of the sport, but it can go too far. And I think we should really, as a community, be cognizant of like what we're saying.
Yeah. Hey, well said, Mike. I really appreciate that, and thank you so much for the interview. I'm really happy to get a chance to catch up with you and learn about what you're doing with Immortals now, and I think give League fans a little bit of insight into like there's still people over there that are thinking about things. So thanks so much for the interview. For everyone else, you can check out the rest of my coverage of all things esports right here on my YouTube channel. I went for a hike this morning because it is important to stay healthy. I wore a mask and all that, but I was just good to get out because it's easy to, well, let's just say I've gained some weight in quarantine. But you know what? As unfortunate as it is that I gained weight, I've also been able to enjoy this wonderful Alienware computer that I have in front of me that you can get at alienware.com/Travis with code Travis10off Q2. And I think you find that healthy balance between gaming, enjoying a machine, an Aurora computer with amazing power in it, and also walking through a field or a ridge line and seeing the Pacific Ocean. I don't really know where I'm going with this, but I'm hoping you stuck around to listen to it anyway. Give me a shout out in the comments if you enjoyed this outro or if you think I need to do it differently next time.